and the anthrax. So these are the kind of climate risks that are also on the table when we're talking about such an incredible change underway.
One of the biggest things I've heard about the methane was the methane being released from the permafrost. I hadn't considered anthrax and other diseases.
Yeah, of course, the permafrost melt releasing those greenhouse gases, including methane, are incredible. They are providing a feedback loop, and it's also happening over geographical scales that we can't do anything about. And that's part of the paper that we tried to say that, look, all that we are saying about climate change may be wrong. This might be a bigger shift in natural systems, what I would call a regime shift. I know that Vancouver and British Columbia are fully dependent on what's going on out in the North Pacific. And the things that are underway now in the ocean and the increased methane also released from the continental shelf is very disturbing. Now, those diseases like anthrax actually took place already last summer. We had one boy who died, or one person who died from anthrax that was released from a permafrost melting area in Siberia, and over 1,000 reindeer herders were evacuated in Yamal about 10 months ago due to the anthrax zone that was created by the melting. So the most important message that we, I think, wanted to put out with the paper is that there's something of a significant regime shift taking place. This will have profound challenges for human institutions. That's why we wanted to say also that, look, we need to do something about this in a new way, and it has to be also better than ever before if we are to survive.
You know, I was watching a video this morning called The Cloud Mystery. It's a documentary by Danish director Lars Oxfeldt, I think it's Mortensen, and it was the work of a Danish scientist, Henrik Svensmark. And I think the gist of it is that he believes that for the most part, what we're seeing occurring is not caused necessarily by human effort or by humankind, that these are a lot of these things that are occurring are natural changes. I wonder if you have a comment or a thought about that.
Yeah, you'll find this same kind of a approach also in those countries which are economically quite much dependent on oil and gas. For us, the closest comparison would be Russia. And there you will find even some of the most leading scientists in Russian Academy of Sciences referring to some kind of a natural cycle that is the foundation of these changes or things like that. I think we have to be also, as scientists, as clear as we can. A lot of that is climate denial. And as it has been often cited in media, I think over 98 or 98.5% of the studies, including ours, point to human-induced climate change as the main driver of these changes. Naturally, there are then regions and geographical zones in Earth and around the planet that will have, or this will play out differently in different parts due to the ocean currents, due to the kind of way the climate system works, and there are many unknowns still in the huge equation of ocean currents, for example. I'm not a person to define how these are, but I know from the scientific literature review and colleagues that this is true. So we have to be very clear on what we are trying to say. If this was not driven by humans, we would say that as well. Because science, especially on this level and in these journals that we are now discussing, is to the maximum as possible moved from politics. There is no motivations or some kind of a agenda. What we try to do is to offer the clearest possible view, but we are not politicians. We are the ones that provide the information for them as reliable as we can. And I think that's why we have to be also very clear, because when you study a lot of the science that says this is not conducted by humans or humans are only a minor factor or things like that, I think investigative journalism has pointed to the presence of oil and gas companies and quite much financing that has gone to that research. So I wouldn't trust those people too much. Climate change won't wait, and despite what kind of political leaders we might have for 4 years or even less or more, the structure of the human society, the global society, is quite firmly now moved into a place where the urgency is real. I had a privilege of working with Barack Obama's administration, China, UK, and India a year ago on something called climate risk, and also including Pentagon and the US Navy. And this was, we have to remember, also part of the same administration as we are talking about today. And there's a firm understanding within those, shall we say, more hidden parts of the US administration that climate change is a national threat to their country. And that's why despite the rhetorics of today, I think we'll see a much better place for the US over the next few years.
There was a report released by the Department of Defense not too long ago that basically says climate change will induce or likely induce another 30 some odd wars, not necessarily as the direct result, but indirect result of climate change, and that we'll see another 1 billion to 1.5 billion people displaced. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, we did discuss this study and also created a report a year ago on climate risk with the US Navy. And I think the colleagues that I worked with from that institution and Pentagon identified also the current war in Syria already containing elements like that, where you have the drought of 2010 that displaced or got people on the move as a kind of a background driver. Of course, the actual war and the kind of things that are going on in their society, the horrible situation over there, and then the geopolitical games of today are the bigger things on the table. But then when you actually look at this so-called subtle signs or background drivers, and anything to do with water in Middle East and Southeast Asia is exactly like you say. You have a huge role of climate change as a background driver for many of the things that are underway.
Tero, I'm curious, how bad is it? I mean, from where you sit at the edges of the boreal forest at this particular moment, when you look at the world around us, around you, what do you see?
Growing darkness, but that means the candles are burning brighter. I have to be also here very aware of the land use change that's underway. Boreal forest and especially marsh mires, these kind of bog systems that are and wetlands that are a key component of the way so-called lungs of the world operate, or the boreal forest, are very much affected by this rapid loss of forests due to many industrial forestry activities. So that's why I have very mixed feeling. We see on the ice and we see in the forests and on the land all of these things that we are discussing, and they are real. They are not something that we are making up or we are just saying because of some theoretical models. They are actually taking place. And also in those areas, personally to me, the most profound view that I have ever seen in my life was in northeastern Siberia, when I had a chance to visit those permafrost melt areas, and you could see at summertime the whole landscape melting away. And it's very heavy. It's very hard to put on words when you see the actual ground sinking. And you know, we are talking about meters per year, how much the land is sinking because it's thawing. So yes, there are these incredible changes underway and they are real. The other good thing is that there are steps we can take. And not all of those steps have to be high-flying global solutions or agreements on climate change. They can actually be right there where you are or the people are in their communities. And that's really where I see the hope, even though the times are rather dark.
So how do you explain this to your family? What do you say that they can do that would be different?
Well, this is of course here where you would get the usual list of use electric cars or buy a hybrid or use the public transport and things like that. What we have tried to put in place under Snow Change is essentially an idea that we need people living also on the land as well, especially indigenous peoples. Once they are on the land, they can monitor and complement the scientific monitoring that's underway through CBM, or also known as community-based monitoring, which is that they can use their traditional knowledge as they are seal hunting or fishing or reindeer herding to record, observe, and interpret the kind of changes that are underway, and they are super valuable. The other thing we are trying to say in our program is ecological restoration. In many cases in the north, including in Canada, a lot of the resilience can be built, for example, on the Fraser catchment area of your huge river, when you have areas that could be restored to build resilience. We can't always stop the big political things underway, but what we can try to do is to increase the resilience in our local places. And for example, I'm leading a 2.7 million euro ecological restoration project in Finland to try to restore a catchment area of a river. And we are also preparing for the climate extreme events by creating new wetlands and restoring trout spawning areas and things like that. So a short answer is that anybody could contribute to that. If you have a neighborhood that has a small salmon stream or creeks or brooks or things like that, try to find an association to work with them to restore your habitats. And of course, depending on the level of society, there are many things to do, but I can't give you a full roadmap. That's always dependent on the place where you are. But these are the kind of two things that we try to say. To recap, I would say more monitoring by the people on the land, and also, as an answer, more governance and restoration of habitats to build resilience.
Now, I should probably know the answer to this question, but I don't. I'm curious how Finland competes with the rest of the world using renewable energy.
Not well. We are still driven quite much by coal, and there is also quite much atomic power. We are actually, believe it or not, we are constructing a new nuclear power plant. So that's one of the strange socio-political arrangements in our place. We also have quite big hydro stations, and I think now research is starting to prove that green energy has nothing to do with hydro due to the both socio-economic impacts on the flooded communities, and also having the reservoirs as a source of methane in most cases. So Finland is very heavy-handed in the way energy is operating here, and that's why we don't get that kind of a wind power boom or even wave power or solar panel work that's underway in Denmark or Sweden. So Finland stands out, unfortunately, as a quite backwards country in this regard.
I guess that offers hope in terms of things can change. Do you ever look towards Germany or other countries that are you may consider leading the way?
Yeah, of course. Denmark and Germany have taken huge steps over the past few years or a decade. And I think many of the things in place in those countries in Europe are good, because they are slowly then taking us who are living in sort of northeastern Europe and having another kind of society slowly into that conversation. Now, when I worked with Barack's administration and the UK and China and India a year ago, one of the big answers that these countries started to have was nuclear power. And that's a hard question, because it's always requiring more mining, more impacts on the land, and currently out of the technologies, or I guess this is also a degrowth question and value-based question. like I think I said last week to some of the journalists in Canada and in the